group freed 17 more people, including, of course, Irish-Israeli girl Emily Hand. How long can this go on? What is the prospects for a long-lasting truce? Let's talk to Eylon Levy, who's Israeli government spokesperson. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We're delighted about Emily Hand and obviously the other hostages from Hamas being released. How long can this go on?
Well, we're of course relieved to get little Emily Hand back. Everyone was moved by those horrific interviews with her father afterwards. She was abducted when he famously thought she was dead and said that he was happy because he could only imagine what horrors she was being subjected to in the Gaza Strip. So we're delighted to have her back. The plan at the moment is we are going to continue putting pressure on Hamas until we get all of the hostages back. That is our goal. There will be no one left behind. We want to bring back the men and the women, the young and the old, the soldiers and the civilians. Today is day 4 of the hostage release pause. We are expecting to receive the remainder of the hostages. Hamas has agreed to reach 50 women and children by the end of today. And then what will happen is that for every additional 10 hostages Hamas releases, we have agreed to another 1-day hostage release pause. We've lined up enough prisoners as part of that exchange to get another 50 hostages back, and we will of course welcome those steps, continuing to release hostages until we get everyone back.
And then what happens?
And then we will continue to put pressure on Hamas and the war will resume. Hamas is responding to military pressure. Hamas is not responding to press releases from governments around the world asking it nicely to release the hostages. Hamas has been begging for a breather. Hamas is giving these hostages back because it's getting clobbered and because it wants to catch its breath. That's why Israel has agreed to a 1-day pause to get the rest of the hostages out. And we're going to continue putting military pressure until we get all of the hostages back. And more importantly, until we end Hamas. Because this war will not end with the terror organization that abducted these children from their beds still in power. Hamas is telling us openly it wants to perpetrate another October 7th massacre. It's telling us it wants to abduct more little children like Emily, and we cannot leave that army of terror in power.
Are you recruiting a new generation of people who will be resentful of Israel, especially when they look around at family members being killed in Gaza and, of course, the Gaza city and other parts of Gaza Strip being levelled to the ground?
We didn't want this war. Hamas declared this war on us, and we're fighting it because we can't leave that terror organization in power. The sad thing is that Israel left the Gaza Strip in 2005. 18 years ago, Israel gave the keys of the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians and said, you run it. And the youngest terrorists who burned, beheaded, and tortured Israelis on October 7th, those 18-year-olds, were born after Israel left the Gaza Strip and gave the keys to the Palestinians. They are the product of 16 years of Hamas rule, of Hamas indoctrination, and we have seen that instead of building a life of prosperity for the people in the Gaza Strip, that jihadi group indoctrinated them and raised them to embrace values of martyrdom and jihad. And we think that when this war ends with the defeat of Hamas, the Gaza Strip is going to have to experience a process of de-radicalization.
And when will the new Hamas start with amongst the children in this situation now?
Hamas is going to be removed from power. It's terrorized the people of Israel for too long. It's oppressed the people of Gaza for too long. Let's remember all that concrete in the tunnels that we have been exposing under people's homes, under schools, under hospitals. That was concrete that was delivered by the international community and was meant to go towards people's houses. And Hamas is...
I'm not questioning that. I'm just wondering the strategy of recruiting youngsters to be future fighters.
Well, for the last 18 years, unfortunately, when Israel was not in the Gaza Strip, that was exactly what Hamas did. It raised the young generation on a diet of jihad and martyrdom in order to fight a war against Israel. And we expect that when this war ends with Hamas's removal from power, the international community will take the steps that are necessary to de-radicalize the Gaza Strip, to tell the people living there that it is important to build and to build sustainably inside the Gaza Strip, to build better lives for themselves, and to stop dreaming of eliminating the state of Israel, of wiping our country off the map, but they need to live side by side with the state of Israel, instead of dreaming that they're going to eliminate our state. That de-radicalization is very important, because otherwise, you're right, we could see a re-eruption of extremism, and that's something we don't want to see.
How is your policy in the West Bank getting on?
At the moment, we're focusing on the war in the Gaza Strip against Hamas, and we're trying to stop the conflict from escalating.
Your fellow countrymen are in West Bank, and there are clashes, and there are feeling that people's property is being confiscated and taken over by settlers. Those sort of things surely exasperate everything.
Well, at the moment, we're trying to maintain order and stability and stop this conflict from escalating. We're in a very dangerous moment. When Hamas invaded on October 7th and murdered all those people, it also called on Palestinians in the West Bank to take their weapons and go out and attack innocent Israelis. It's been trying to drag Hezbollah in Lebanon into the war. It's been trying to drag the Houthis in Yemen into the war as well. And what we're doing at the moment, while we work to destroy Hamas's army of terror in the Gaza Strip so it can never attack our people like it did on October 7th, is to stop the situation from escalating, despite attempts that we've seen to try to escalate the conflict from Palestinian armed groups in the West Bank as well.
The Irish government say they're very consistent on condemning Hamas, yet in the first paragraph of the welcome that Taoiseach Leo Varadkar gave on the release of Emily Hand, that's come in for sizable criticism in Israel. Is just reading a first line of a statement, is that justified for the vitriol in the newspapers and with spokespeople in the Israeli government?
That first line was unfortunate. It was crass, and it has caused a lot of hurt and upset in Israel, and a country that is still grieving for the people who were killed on October 7th and trying to get those hostages back. If you take that statement literally, that she was lost and found, it would appear to imply that Emily Hand was hiding in a lost and found box. And if you take it allegorically and say that it's an allusion to scripture, then I'm afraid it's even worse, because you can't compare little Emily Hand to the prodigal son who squandered his inheritance and returned to his father for his forgiveness. But as for the rest of the statement, nowhere in that statement is Hamas mentioned. And we think it's very unfortunate when the Irish government wants to criticize the state of Israel, which it does very often. It is very specific and calculated with its language, and on this occasion has chosen not to be specific in its condemnation of Hamas. But besides that, the really problematic statement with that statement is that if we had taken the Irish government's advice and gone for a ceasefire, little Emily Hand and all those other children would still be hostages of Hamas. Because while we appreciate Ireland's hope and prayers to bring back Emily Hand and the other children, it's not those prayers that brought her back. It was Israel's military pressure. And that military pressure is going to continue until we get everyone back. And I should add, when that statement calls for a permanent ceasefire, it is telling us that the army of terror that abducted those children on October 7th, that orphaned many of them, that massacred their neighbors, should remain in power and should remain free to reoffend when it is telling us it wants to perpetrate more October 7th massacres. And that's why, unfortunately, this war is going to have to end with the end of Hamas and not with a ceasefire that leaves in place the army of terror that abducted our children and is promising to abduct them again.
You've answered in a military way. I can understand that. Ireland's approach has always been humanitarian.